She kicked the swing so hard it snapped. My wife fell before I could reach her. That's what I told the paramedics over and over, as Cynthia Rowell, president of our Maple Ridge Preserve HOA, stood 3 feet away, pretending she hadn't just done it. Her pearl bracelet glinted in the sunlight as she folded her arms, chin lifted like she was inspecting a broken ornament instead of a human being. "You people think the rules don't apply to you," she said. Her voice carried across the neatly trimmed lawns, smooth and poisonous. "Porch structures must be pre-approved. You were warned." For a moment, the whole street froze. Neighbors watching, sprinklers still hissing, and my wife, Elena, clutching her stomach, whispering she couldn't feel the baby move. That's when something inside me broke. I straightened slowly and said, "Cynthia, that swing was inspected 6 months ago. By me." She blinked, confused. "I'm a licensed structural engineer. I designed half the load-bearing decks in this development. You signed the approval yourself." A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Then the mask snapped back. "We'll see what the board says about your conduct," she hissed. Before I go further, before this story gets buried under another HOA cover-up, subscribe now. I'm documenting every second of this nightmare in real time, and the next clip may not stay online for long. My name's Landon Pierce, and I've built homes that withstood hurricanes. But nothing prepared me for the storm that started on my own porch. I don't raise my voice, I don't threaten, I document. That's what I've always done, both as an engineer and a small-time housing corruption vlogger, truth frame by frame. That swing she destroyed wasn't just wood and chains. It was the only place my wife could rest outside since her back surgery. The doctor had said gentle motion helped circulation in the final trimester. We'd spent nights sanding it together, picking a pale blue color to match the nursery. Elena called it our waiting place. So, when Cynthia marched onto our lawn screaming about unsightly displays, it wasn't about property codes, it was about power, about control. She'd fined us twice already. Once for leaving recycling bins visible for 10 minutes, another time for unapproved decorative lighting after Elena hung fairy lights on the porch rail. Each warning came with a signature, C. Rowell, HOA President. Neighbors whispered that she was losing her mind since her husband's re-election campaign started, that she wanted Maple Ridge to look perfect for the cameras. Maybe that's why she came storming in that afternoon, phone in hand, flanked by 2 board members recording for documentation. But none of them expected what happened next. Elena stood, soft-spoken as ever, and said, "You can't just barge in here. I'm 8 months pregnant." Cynthia's lip curled. "Then you should know better than to dangle from a structure that violates community guidelines." She stepped forward, heel grinding into the porch step. When the swing creaked, she snapped, "Take it down, now." Elena shook her head. I remember her hand brushing the armrest, calm, steady. And then Cynthia lashed out with her foot, kicking the seat's edge so hard the chain tore free. The swing twisted. Elena gasped, and wood cracked against the floorboards. I reached her just as she hit the railing. The sound that came out of her, it wasn't a scream. It was something smaller, fragile. The board members froze. One of them whispered, "Cynthia?" But she turned on him, shouting, "Get this on record. She attacked me." That was the moment I saw Glenn Hartley standing at the curb, the maintenance contractor. His hands trembled on the hedge trimmer, and a small red light blinked on his chest, his body cam. He was recording. He saw everything. I knelt beside Elena, whispering her name, counting seconds that felt like hours until the ambulance arrived. Sirens, neighbors, the metallic taste of fear in my mouth. Cynthia kept talking to the officers like nothing had happened, citing HOA policy, pointing to some line about unauthorized modifications. When they finally loaded Elena into the stretcher, Cynthia looked at me and said, "Actions have consequences, Mr. Pierce." I remember the sunlight on her shoes, the same foot that struck my wife. That's when I knew this wasn't an accident. It was arrogance backed by paperwork, and I swore she'd never hide behind it again. If you've ever seen someone abuse power because they think the law protects them, stay with me. What happened next didn't just end her career. It changed how HOAs are run across this state. I'm Landon Pierce, and this was the day the rules turned violent. They kept me in the hospital hallway that night, under flickering fluorescent lights and the constant beep of heart monitors. the smell of antiseptic mixed with the metallic tang of blood. I could still hear Elena's voice echoing in my head, soft, trembling, saying she couldn't feel the baby. I'd replayed it so many times that I stopped noticing the doctors passing by. When Officer Keating finally approached, clipboard in hand, I already knew what he was about to say. "Mr. Pierce, we've taken statements from the witnesses," he began carefully. "According to Mrs. Rowell and her board members, your wife fell during a verbal dispute. They claim you became aggressive afterward." I laughed, short and hollow. "Aggressive?" My wife was bleeding. He shifted uncomfortably. "There's mention of a physical altercation. The HOA has already filed a complaint for property damage and endangerment." That's how fast they worked, before I'd even wiped Elena's blood off my hands. Cynthia Rowell had turned assault into paperwork. I leaned back against the cold wall. "You ever heard of a pre-approved structure officer?" He frowned. "What?" "The swing she kicked," I said. "I designed it. It met every state load code. It wasn't unsafe. It was targeted." He didn't reply, just scribbled something on his pad. That's when I realized the trap. The HOA's rules weren't about safety. They were about narrative. Control the version, control the outcome. When he left, I called my neighbor, Mary Tillman. Her voice was shaking. "Landon, people are scared. Cynthia's already going door to door saying Elena attacked her. Did anyone see what really happened?" "Everyone saw," she said quietly. "But nobody wants trouble. She's threatening fines. Half the block's on her client list." Typical. Cynthia used her real estate license like a weapon. She'd list your home, then punish you if you didn't sell through her. She owned this neighborhood in every way that mattered. The nurse came to tell me Elena was stable. Placental bruising, internal trauma, but the baby's heartbeat had steadied. Relief hit me so hard my knees almost gave out. I went in and saw her lying there, pale but alive, eyes half open. She managed a small smile. "You recorded it, didn't you?" she whispered. "Not me," I said. "But someone did." That night, sitting beside her bed, I watched the local news scroll across the TV. HOA president claims attack by resident's wife, seeks police investigation. My chest tightened. They'd framed us perfectly. That's when I made a decision. If Cynthia wanted to wage war through the media, she'd chosen the wrong man. When I left the hospital, dawn was breaking. Maple Ridge looked sterile in the early light, lawns trimmed to military precision, identical shutters, perfect silence. As I pulled up to the house, I saw the notice taped to my door. Temporary suspension of resident privileges. Board review. Pending. I tore it down and stood there for a long moment. My porch, the same place where Elena had fallen, was spotless. Someone had already cleaned the blood. The swing was gone. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Inside, the phone rang. HOA office number. I let it ring out, then checked my email. A message from Cynthia. "Mr. Pierce, due to ongoing investigations into your conduct, we advise you to refrain from speaking to media or residents about internal HOA matters. Failure to comply may result in legal action or community expulsion." She'd already turned the screws. I opened my laptop and began cataloging every piece of correspondence I'd ever had with the HOA. Permit approvals, emails with timestamps, inspection sign-offs. I kept everything, because that's what engineers do. We track, we measure, we prove. And somewhere in those numbers, there had to be a crack in her armor. Around noon, Mary texted me a photo. Cynthia and her 2 board members were standing on her lawn, taking pictures of my house from across the street. Below the image, Mary wrote, "They're saying, you built an illegal structure that endangered public safety." I replied with just 2 words, "Keep recording." By evening, my front yard looked like a war zone of documentation. Notices fluttering on stakes, orange inspection tags, a bright yellow pending review ribbon across my porch like crime tape. Cynthia had built her case overnight, layer by layer, while half the neighborhood watched in silence. But what she didn't know was that I had something she couldn't touch: facts. The swing's approval code, the engineering certificate, her digital signature, and somewhere in this perfect polished community, a man named Glenn Hartley had a camera that recorded everything. As I stood there, staring at that empty space where the swing once hung, I made a promise. I'd expose her the same way she'd exposed everyone else, publicly. If you've ever had someone twist the truth faster than you can defend it, you know the feeling. That sick mix of rage and helplessness. I felt both, standing on that porch. But underneath, something sharper was forming. Resolve. She'd declared this a rules game. Fine. I'd show her what happens when someone plays by every rule. On camera, in front of the entire city. And I wouldn't stop until the world knew exactly what Cynthia Rowell did. The next morning, I heard the hum of an electric trimmer outside my window. I pulled back the curtain and saw Glenn Hartley standing near the porch, clipping the hedge line that had already been trimmed the day before. His movements were sharp, mechanical, like a man forcing himself to stay busy to drown out his thoughts. The red light on his chest camera blinked with every breath he took. When I stepped outside, he didn't look up, just kept cutting. Clippings scattered across the walkway like static. His jaw tightened every time the trimmer whirred. "You're early," I said quietly. He paused mid-cut, pretending to adjust the extension cord. HOA ordered immediate landscape compliance after yesterday's incident, he muttered. His tone was flat, rehearsed, but his hands were shaking. The same hands that had held that hedge trimmer when he'd seen everything. I leaned against the porch post, the one that used to hold the swing, and studied him. "I know you didn't clean up the blood. That wasn't you, was it?" He flinched. His fingers twitched on the handle. Then he shut off the trimmer. "I don't want any trouble, Mr. Pierce," he said, without turning around. Sweat glistened on the back of his neck. "You were here, Glenn," I said. "You saw what she did." He inhaled slowly, shoulders rising, then exhaled like the air hurt to push out. "They told me to delete the footage," he whispered. "Said it was a liability risk. Said it'd make the community look bad." "Whose idea?" He hesitated, eyes darting to the street where Cynthia's white Lexus sat idling by the curb. She was inside, probably watching through tinted glass. Glenn's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. "I have a family," he said finally. "Kids, medical bills. I can't afford to lose this contract." That's when I realized what kind of power Cynthia really held. It wasn't just fines and letters. It was quiet fear. The kind that eats through communities until no one dares speak. "You're not the one who should be scared," I told him. "She is." He looked up for the first time then. His eyes were bloodshot, ringed with sleeplessness. For a second, I saw the conflict break across his face. Loyalty on one side, conscience on the other. Then he dropped his gaze and turned the trimmer back on. The sound drowned out the silence between us. I didn't push further. Not yet. People like Glenn needed time to choose between fear and truth. By afternoon, the neighborhood was crawling with activity. Cynthia had organized a maintenance audit to make her version of the story look official. Clipboards, photographs, signatures, anything to bury the assault under layers of bureaucracy. She strutted across driveways like a queen inspecting her kingdom. When our paths crossed, she gave me a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lovely morning, isn't it?" she said. I didn't answer. My phone was already recording. The footage would matter later, not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. The arrogance in her silence would become the very proof of her guilt. After she left, I walked down to the community park where the HOA kept its maintenance shed. Glenn's truck was parked there, back open, equipment stacked neatly. I found him sitting on the tailgate, staring at the ground. The trimmer rested beside him like a weapon he didn't want to hold. "You ever think about what happens when lies become policy?" I asked. He rubbed his hands over his face, then through his hair, exhaling shakily. "They warned me," he murmured. "Said if I kept that footage, I'd be violating confidentiality." "Whose confidentiality? Hers or yours?" He didn't answer, but his jaw tightened again, a pulse of guilt flickering across his expression. "You've got it, don't you?" I said quietly. His head dropped lower. The silence was an answer. I stepped back, giving him space. "If you ever decide you want this to mean something, you know where to find me." He nodded once, still staring at his boots. That night, I sat on the edge of the empty porch, listening to the neighborhood hum, lawnmowers, sprinklers, distant laughter. Normal life continued, indifferent to what had happened here. I looked at the empty spot where the swing used to hang and wondered how many people had chosen silence because of Cynthia Rowell. Somewhere out there, Glenn was staring at the same streetlight, his conscience heavier than any paycheck. I didn't need to chase him. The truth has a way of suffocating people until they finally exhale it. The next step wasn't about confronting Cynthia again. It was about patience, letting her believe she'd won while her own people unraveled behind her. If you've ever seen guilt eat someone alive, you know the look. It's not in the eyes, it's in the hands. Trembling, restless, like Glenn's when he tried to hold that trimmer steady. That's how I knew the tide was already turning. He wouldn't keep quiet forever. The tide turned faster than I expected. By Monday morning, a new notice appeared in my mailbox, stamped urgent, board action required. The envelope was thick, heavy with legal intimidation. Inside was a summons for an emergency conduct review, accusing me of threatening a community employee, Glenn Hartley. My stomach sank. Cynthia had flipped the script again. I drove straight to the HOA office on Briar Hollow Lane. The building looked sterile, white columns, manicured hedges, and that corporate smell of lemon disinfectant. A framed photo of Cynthia shaking hands with the mayor hung beside the reception desk. The receptionist glanced up like she'd been warned I was coming. "Mr. Pierce," she said politely, "Mrs. Rowell is expecting you." I followed her into the boardroom. The blinds were half closed, slicing sunlight into thin stripes across the table. Cynthia sat at the head, her pearl bracelet gleaming again, a cup of tea steaming beside a stack of folders. 2 other board members flanked her, both avoiding my eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice syrupy. "We're here to address multiple community concerns regarding your behavior." My behavior? I kept my tone even. "My wife's still recovering from an assault, Mrs. Rowell. Shouldn't that be the concern?" Her smile didn't move. "You've made serious allegations. However, the board has reviewed internal reports suggesting you've harassed our maintenance contractor and spread defamatory claims online. That's a violation of Section 8C Public Conduct Standards." So that was her move? Discredit the witness before he could speak. If Glenn folded under pressure, she'd erase every trace of what happened. I sat down slowly. "You really want to discuss community conduct, Cynthia? Because I brought copies of your signed permit approvals, dated, logged, and city certified. The swing you called illegal was approved under your authority." Her teacup paused midair. "Those documents are irrelevant." "No," I said. "They're evidence." Her composure cracked for a split second, then she laughed softly. "You engineers always think paper protects you, but this isn't a courtroom, Mr. Pierce. This is a community board, and the community believes me." I studied her, the way she leaned back just slightly, as if she'd already rehearsed every outcome. She thought this was a closed system, her rules, her witnesses, her word. That was fine. Closed systems collapse hardest when light gets in. "Then record this meeting," I said, "for transparency." One of the board members, a nervous man named Ben, looked to Cynthia. "We, don't normally record internal sessions." "Maybe we should start," I replied. Cynthia's smile vanished. "Meeting adjourned," she snapped. The room cleared fast. Ben avoided me entirely. Outside, I saw Glenn's truck idling near the curb. He sat behind the wheel, shoulders hunched, staring at the dashboard. I walked over. "They just used your name," I said quietly. "Claimed I threatened you." His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I didn't say that," he whispered. "I know, but they did. You're next if you stay quiet." He swallowed, eyes darting to the security camera above the HOA door. "She told me the footage never existed," he said. "Said the HOA didn't authorize body cam recordings on private property." "That's a lie," I said. "It's written into your contractor agreement for liability insurance. I've seen it." He looked up at me, fear and exhaustion battling across his face. "If I hand over that footage, I'll lose my job. Maybe worse." I leaned closer. "You'll lose a lot more if you don't. They'll make you the villain." For a moment, his grip loosened, his breathing steadied. Then Cynthia's Lexus turned the corner. He tensed instantly, started the truck, and muttered, "I can't, not yet." The tires squealed as he pulled away. I watched him disappear down the road, feeling that familiar blend of anger and clarity. Cynthia's entire defense relied on isolation, keeping witnesses scared and truth buried under procedure. But I had something she didn't: patience and proof. Back home, I compiled everything: emails, text exchanges, HOA bulletins, into a single timeline. Then I added one new file: HOA meeting audio extract.mp3. I'd left my phone recording in my pocket the entire session. Cynthia's voice was crisp, clear, and smug. "This isn't a courtroom, Mr. Pierce. The community believes me." Perfect. That was her downfall, hidden inside her arrogance. That night, I sat on the porch beside the empty chain hooks and listened to crickets fill the silence. The swing was gone, but I could almost feel its weight swaying in memory. Elena called from inside, her voice weak but steady. "You'll fix this, won't you?" I looked out at the rows of perfect houses, every window glowing like a quiet accomplice. "Yeah," I said softly. "But not here. Out there, where everyone can see." If you've ever faced someone who hides behind authority, you know what comes next. They always overreach. And when they do, all it takes is one recording to bring their empire down. Cynthia just handed me mine. That night, I stayed up piecing the audio together, trimming every second of Cynthia's smugness into something razor sharp. Her words played on a loop through my headphones. "This isn't a courtroom, Mr. Pierce. The community believes me." I slowed it down, isolated her tone, her laughter at the end. It wasn't confidence, it was entitlement. By 3 a.m., I had a 7-minute cut ready. The next morning, I needed a neutral witness, someone outside Maple Ridge's polished walls who couldn't be manipulated. I drove to the local cafe near downtown Asheville, the kind of place where people argued about zoning laws and city contracts over burnt coffee. Nora Lively was already there, seated by the window, tapping a pen against a reporter's notebook. We hadn't spoken in years. She'd been my colleague back when I used to publish engineering exposés on corrupt developers. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with gray, but her eyes were the same, sharp and searching. "I saw the local piece," she said without preamble. "The HOA president's calling it an accident. Says your wife fell on her own." I slid my laptop across the table. "You'll want to hear this first." The cafe noise blurred around us as I hit play. Cynthia's voice filled the air, her mockery, her dismissal, the exact sentence that revealed she was running a court without laws. Nora didn't blink. She just scribbled a note, paused the recording, and said, "That's abuse of authority, but you'll need visual proof to make the story undeniable." "Working on it," I said. She leaned forward. "Then work fast. If she's what you say, she'll file an injunction to stop this before it spreads. Give me something airtight and we'll go public." Outside, the sun caught the edge of my reflection in the cafe glass. Tired eyes, unshaven, haunted. But beneath it, something steadier was forming. A plan. When I got back to Maple Ridge, the HOA parking lot was full. Cynthia had called a midweek safety review, using the incident as a pretext to parade her authority. I parked across the street, staying out of sight. Residents gathered near the gazebo while she stood in front, clipboard raised, smiling for someone's phone camera. Her PR instincts were flawless. Used the same weapon every time, appearance. Then I spotted Glenn, off to the side, wearing that same uniform and camera rig. He kept his head down, pretending to inspect mulch levels. When she wasn't looking, he shot a glance toward my car, a subtle nod. Then his hand brushed his chest camera once. 3 quick taps. It wasn't random, it was signal. Later that evening, he showed up at my house. He didn't knock, he just stood near the curb, as if being too close to me might cost him his job. I walked out slowly. "They made me sign a statement," he said. "Said I had to confirm you threatened me." "You didn't sign it, did you?" His eyes flickered. "I had to, but I changed the date. Doesn't match the report. If she files it, the timeline collapses." "Smart," I said. He shifted on his feet, glancing over his shoulder. "She ordered a new policy memo this afternoon. Says no maintenance recordings can be stored longer than 72 hours. That hit me like a punch. So she's wiping her own liability archive." He nodded, breathing fast. "All but one copy. The backup feed uploads automatically to my insurance provider's portal. It's encrypted. I can't access it without a work order request, but you can. Because I'm the one who designed the contractor liability framework for this development," I finished for him. Glenn nodded, half terrified, half relieved. "You're the engineer on file. You still have technical authorization. It's your project tag." For a second, the night felt electric. Every piece clicked together. The footage, the metadata, the contract I'd signed 3 years ago when Maple Ridge was still under construction. I'd built the very system that could destroy her. "Glenn," I said quietly, "you just changed everything." He looked up, guilt etched into every line of his face. "I didn't do it for you," he said. "I did it because I saw her face when she hit your wife. It wasn't an accident." Then he turned and walked off into the dark, leaving me with a single truth humming in my chest. The recording existed. Somewhere in a server room tied to an insurance firm's database sat the unedited proof of Cynthia Rowell's assault. By midnight, I'd already drafted the request to access it. The form was long, full of legal phrasing, but I knew exactly which clause would unlock it, the one I'd written myself to ensure data integrity for third-party contractors. I filled it in line by line, attached my license number, and hit send. Tomorrow, she'd find out that the same system she weaponized against us was about to expose her in high definition. If you've ever built something meant to protect people and watched it be used to hurt them instead, you'll understand the satisfaction of turning it back the right way. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration, and for once, the rules were on my side. By sunrise, I was parked outside Brightstone Mutual Insurance, the regional firm that handled Maple Ridge's liability coverage. The glass building reflected the early fog like a mirror, cold, corporate, anonymous. Inside those servers was the truth, time-stamped and untouchable. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, the access request I'd submitted still pending in my inbox. When the doors opened at 8, I walked in like I still belonged to the system, clipboard under my arm, ID badge from an old project clipped to my jacket. The receptionist smiled absently. "Can I help you?" "Routine infrastructure audit," I said easily. "Engineer of record for Maple Ridge Preserve. The HOA's insurance renewal depends on a chain of custody validation." She blinked, typing something. "Name?" "Pierce. Landon Pierce." Her screen refreshed, and after a second she nodded. "Oh, yes, you're listed under their original compliance contract. Data access authorization. Confirmed for the next 24 hours. One door opened, and just like that, I was in. The data clerk led me to a small cubicle lined with humming servers. "You've got a lot of storage tied to that community," she said casually. "Surveillance, maintenance logs, inspection records, all encrypted backups." I smiled faintly. That's what keeps people honest. When she left, I sat down and typed in my access key. The portal blinked alive. Maple Ridge Preserve. Maintenance records. Incident archive. R04-12 footage.gh. The timestamp matched the day of the assault. I clicked download. For 30 seconds, the progress bar crawled, then froze. A red notification flashed. Remote access attempt detected. Connection interrupted. Someone else was inside the system. I tried again, rerouting through the redundancy channel I'd helped build. The footage loaded halfway, static, muffled audio, then the faint sound of Elena's voice. Another second, and Cynthia's shrill tone sliced through. "You people think the rules don't apply to you." Then it stopped. File corrupted. A system override appeared. User, Rowell, C, she'd gotten to it. I sat back, heart hammering. Of course she had connections. As HOA president and licensed broker, she had access to the insurance liaison. She'd requested a deletion order, but she didn't know the system as well as I did. Buried in the code, I'd built a redundancy safeguard, a failsafe to prevent data tampering. Any deletion attempt triggered a duplicate backup to the state compliance server for review. I found the confirmation buried under notifications. Autosync, Compliance Oversight Division, completed 07:43 a.m. That was my win. I copied the confirmation packet to a portable drive, encrypted it twice, and slipped it into my pocket. Even if Cynthia managed to bury the local copy, the state now had her evidence preserved by law. She'd never see that coming. Walking out of Brightstone, I felt lighter. The morning air cut sharp against my face, and for the first time since the assault, I felt momentum shifting. This wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about cornering her publicly. Back at the hospital, Elena was awake and stronger. The doctor said the baby's heart rate had stabilized. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. "You found it, didn't you?" "Almost," I said, brushing her hair back. She tried to delete it, but the system beat her to it. She exhaled shakily. You built that system. Yeah, I said quietly. Guess it's about time it did what it was meant to do. As I sat beside her, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Cynthia. Mr. Pierce, this is a courtesy warning. Your unauthorized access this morning constitutes data theft. I strongly advise you to return any files you've obtained before this escalates legally. I played it twice, then forwarded it to Nora. Her reply came minutes later. Perfect. That's intimidation on record. We'll use it when we go live. I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen until my reflection blurred in the glass. That night, I met Glenn again, this time in the empty parking lot behind the community maintenance shed. The air smelled of cut grass and diesel. He looked different now, shoulders squared, expression resolute. I heard she tried to delete the video, he said. She failed, I replied. System pushed a copy to the state, her own name's attached to the override request. He gave a low whistle. That's poetic. Now we make it public, I said. No courtroom, no boardroom, everyone watching. He hesitated, glancing toward the neighborhood lights. You're really going to do it? She did this on camera, I said. She built her reputation on appearances. Let's see how she handles them turning against her. For the first time since it all began, Glenn smiled, small, nervous, but real. As we walked back toward the silent rows of houses, I could almost hear the creak of the missing swing in the wind. Every inch of Maple Ridge had been shaped by her illusion of control. Now, that illusion was cracking. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who thinks power equals protection, you know the satisfaction of watching their foundation tremble. By tomorrow, Cynthia Rowell's empire wouldn't just have cracks, it would have a broadcast date. The next morning, I found a folded note slipped under my front door. It wasn't from the HOA, no logo, no threat. Just one sentence written in shaky handwriting. Meet me where it started, no cameras. I knew who it was. The air was thick with humidity when I reached the edge of the community pond. Ducks drifted across the water, and the weeping willow's reflection rippled like smoke. Glenn stood near the bench, arms crossed, baseball cap pulled low. For once, the blinking red light on his chest camera was gone. He looked up when I approached. His eyes were bloodshot, and his voice was hoarse. You were right, he said quietly. The truth doesn't stop hurting when you hide it. It gets louder. I stayed silent, giving him space. He took a long breath, exhaling like it cost him something. The night after it happened, Cynthia called me into her office, told me the board needed the footage wiped before the insurance company reviewed it, said it was a community protection measure. His fingers flexed at his sides, knuckles whitening. She offered me a bonus if I confirmed your wife had stepped forward aggressively, made it look like self-defense. I told her no. She smiled and said, if the footage leaked, she'd sue me for breach of contract and destroy me in court. Those were her words. The wind rustled through the reeds. For a moment, the world around us felt still. I asked, did you delete it? He shook his head. I tried. The system wouldn't let me. Said it was locked for state compliance, but she doesn't know that. She thinks it's gone forever. I studied him, the tremor in his hands, the way his shoulders sagged like a man who hadn't slept in days. He wasn't just scared anymore. He was ashamed. She told me to write a fake maintenance report too, he continued. Said you'd threaten me with a tool. I signed it, but I changed the date so it wouldn't match her copy. I thought it might help you if someone checked the records. It already had. That discrepancy was what allowed me to connect the deletion attempt to her account. She's been doing this for years, he said, covering her own mistakes. Last summer, she forced a couple to pay for a drainage repair that was actually her nephew's contracting error. I wanted to speak up, but she owned your paycheck, I finished. He nodded, eyes glassy. And my mortgage, my kids' insurance, everything. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, you don't have to carry this alone. We're going public. There's still time to stand on the right side of it. His jaw tightened. You think the board won't retaliate? They'll blacklist me. I'll never get another maintenance job in this county. Then let them, I said. You'll have your name back. That's worth more than a paycheck. He looked out over the pond. The reflection of the HOA clubhouse shimmered in the water, a perfect illusion of calm. He pulled a small flash drive from his pocket, wrapped in a crumpled napkin. I copied my service log before they locked me out, he said. Every inspection, every order she forged my signature on. It's not the footage, but it connects her deletion attempt to her system login. You can prove intent. I reach for it carefully. Glenn, this could ruin her. He gave a dry laugh. Good, maybe then I'll sleep again. He started to walk away, then stopped. There's one more thing, he said without turning. The other board members know. They're just scared of her. But one of them, Ben, he keeps a private cloud archive of all HOA minutes. She forced him to falsify entries, but he saved the originals. If you can get to him, you'll have everything. I took a step closer. Would he talk to me? Not yet, Glenn said. But if he sees what happens to me, maybe he will. The meaning hit me hard. He wasn't planning to hide anymore. Don't do anything reckless, I warned. He shook his head. No, just honest. She'll find out I met you. I'm done lying for her. Whatever comes next, I can live with it. Then he turned and walked off down the gravel path, sunlight glinting off the pond behind him. I sat there for a while, turning the flash drive over in my hand, the weight of it heavier than any weapon. Every word, every forged order, proof that Cynthia's empire wasn't built on authority, but blackmail. When I got home, I plugged it into my laptop. The folders, opened like a confession, Rowell amendments, edited minutes, Hartley threat form DDF. The timestamps matched the day after Elena's assault. It was all there. The truth was no longer a secret. It was a chain reaction. And I'd just pulled the first pin. I spent the next 12 hours dissecting Glenn's flash drive. Each file was a thread leading deeper into Cynthia Rowell's web. Altered timestamps, fake inspection forms, even HOA minutes rewritten to erase fines she'd illegally waived for her friends. Every edit carried her digital fingerprint. I sat in my home office, lights off, the glow of the monitor casting cold blue shadows across the walls. It felt like being inside her mind, organized, precise, and completely rotten. By dawn, I had everything cataloged. The only thing missing was the visual confirmation. The footage still sitting on the state compliance server. Nora said she could get a verification statement from the department's public records officer, but we'd need to make the request official, not personal. That meant timing, and timing was something I could engineer. I left the house at sunrise and drove to the courthouse downtown. The building's stone steps were slick from last night's rain, the flag whipping overhead. Inside, I found the clerk of records and filed a notarized petition for data verification under Public Integrity Clause 12A. It was a small, rarely used section of the law meant for contractors reporting government fraud. It fit perfectly, and it required the footage to be released within 72 hours. When I stepped outside, the sky had cleared. For the first time in weeks, I felt momentum on my side. At noon, I met Nora at her newsroom. Her desk was chaos, coffee cups, sticky notes, 3 screens running at once. She looked up as I approached, eyes bright with the kind of curiosity only good journalists have before a story explodes. You weren't exaggerating, she said, scrolling through Glenn's files. This isn't just misconduct, it's systemic. She's been laundering board funds through vendor contracts and threatening anyone who questions it. She'll try to spin it again, I said. She always does. Nora grinned. That's the beauty of live television. No edits, no filters. You sure you're ready for this? I nodded. More than ready. We decided to structure the expose around 3 components: the footage confirmation, Glenn's service logs, and Cynthia's audio from the meeting. But Nora wanted a bigger stage than just a pre-recorded report. There's a community election meeting this Friday, she said. Public, on HOA grounds. If we stream live, we can air the evidence in real time. The city networks will pick it up instantly. It was bold, maybe reckless, but perfect. Back at Maple Ridge, word spread fast that the HOA would hold an emergency address to reaffirm community leadership. Cynthia was making her move, doubling down, before the truth hit her doorstep. Flyers appeared in mailboxes, promising transparency and unity. It almost made me laugh. That evening, I saw her inspecting the clubhouse lawn, directing workers like she was hosting a parade. Her voice carried across the cul-de-sac. Everything needs to look perfect by Friday. I watched from my car, unseen. Perfection was her addiction, and the one thing she couldn't maintain under pressure. Later, Glenn texted me. She knows I talked. Pulled my contract today. But I don't care. I'm still in. I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "You did the right thing." He sent one more line, "Then let's finish it right." The next day I met Nora again at the station to finalize the plan. She'd secured permission to broadcast live from the HOA's public lot. The segment would start as a neutral report on community accountability and shift into exposure once the evidence played. I'd stand beside her when it aired, no hiding, no hesitation. Before leaving, she said, "When this goes out, it won't just hit local news. State outlets will pick it up. Once they do, it's irreversible." "That's the goal," I said. Back home, I walked the neighborhood one last time before everything changed. The lawns were perfect, the driveways spotless, an illusion polished to hide the rot beneath. I could almost hear Cynthia's voice echoing from every rulebook she'd ever waved at us. Order, standards, respectability, words that meant obedience. At the far end of the street, under the oak tree, the empty chains from the old porch swing clinked softly in the breeze. They sounded like a countdown. Friday would be the moment. The footage was due for release. Nora's crew was ready, and Glenn's files were queued to overlay live. Cynthia believed she was hosting her own victory rally, surrounded by homeowners she'd manipulated for years. She had no idea she'd invited her own broadcast funeral. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I looked toward her house, its lights blazing like a stage before a curtain call, and whispered to myself, "You wanted the spotlight, Cynthia. Now you'll drown in it." If you've ever faced someone who built an empire on lies, you know the quiet before exposure isn't peace, it's pressure. And when it breaks, the truth doesn't whisper, it roars. Friday arrived like a held breath. By 9 a.m., Maple Ridge Preserve looked like it was preparing for a festival instead of a reckoning. Folding chairs lined the clubhouse lawn, a temporary stage set up under a white canopy, microphones glinting in the sun. The HOA banner fluttered behind the podium, Community Integrity Forum. The irony was almost poetic. Cynthia Rowell moved between clusters of residents with her usual poise, shaking hands, offering smiles that never reached her eyes. She wore a pastel suit, the kind politicians pick for approachability, and a pearl pin shaped like a dove. If guilt had a costume, this was it. From a distance, I watched the scene unfold through my windshield. Nora's news van sat parked across the street, antenna extended, her team running cables into the open field. She'd disguised the live crew as local volunteers to avoid suspicion. Smart move. At 10 sharp, she called me through the earpiece she'd given me the night before. "We're live in 20 minutes, she said. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready since the swing hit the ground," I said. In the passenger seat sat my laptop, open to the compliance database. The footage had officially been verified by the state that morning, time-stamped, sealed, admissible. Glenn's flash drive was inserted beside it, his logs already queued. I just needed one signal from Nora to start the upload sequence that would mirror the files to every network covering the event. Cynthia stepped onto the stage at precisely 10:30. The crowd quieted immediately. "Good morning, Maple Ridge family," she began, her voice smooth and measured. "I know there's been confusion, even rumors about recent events. Today, I want to reaffirm what makes this community strong: unity, trust, and accountability." Her words dripped sugar but hid steel. This was her script: control the narrative before anyone else could. She gestured toward a table of board members behind her. Ben, the same man Glenn said kept private records, sat stiffly at the end, his face pale. When our eyes met across the lawn, he looked down fast. I couldn't tell if it was fear or guilt, maybe both. Nora gave the cue. "When I raise my hand, start the mirror feed," she said. I got out of the car and crossed the street. People turned as I walked up, some whispering, others avoiding eye contact. Cynthia saw me too. Her smile froze mid-sentence. "Mr. Pierce," she said into the microphone, tone still honeyed but tight. "How kind of you to join us. I was just discussing responsible community behavior. Perhaps you'd like to listen for once." "I plan to," I said, stepping closer. "And so will everyone else." Her eyes narrowed. "Security," she called softly to one of the attendants. But before they could move, Nora raised her hand from the back of the crowd. I hit enter. The projector screen behind Cynthia flickered, the HOA logo dissolving into static. Then the image sharpened, The Brightstone insurance archive footage, uncut, unedited. Cynthia's voice filled the air. You people think the rules don't apply to you. Then the kick, the chain snapping, Elena's body hitting the floorboards. Gasps rippled through the audience like a physical shockwave. Cynthia spun around, eyes wide. "That video is doctored!" she screamed. "It's a setup!" Nora's cameraman zoomed in, catching every twitch of panic. "This footage is state-verified," Nora's voice announced through the speakers. "And Mrs. Rowell, your own deletion request was filed under your account ID." The crowd erupted. Ben stood up suddenly, shouting, "She made me falsify the minutes. She said it was to protect the community." That was the breaking point. Residents surged forward, phones raised, recording every second. Cynthia tried to snatch the microphone back, but the chaos drowned her out. "You can't do this," she hissed, turning to me. "You think they'll believe you over me?" I held up Glenn's service log, its printed timestamps glowing in the sunlight. "They already do." She froze, the reality settling behind her eyes like a shadow. Cameras clicked, neighbors shouted questions, and Nora's live feed streamed everything straight to the evening news. Glenn appeared at the back of the crowd. For once, his shoulders weren't hunched. He stood tall, silent, watching her unravel under the same rules she'd weaponized against everyone else. Within minutes, the police, summoned by Nora's prearranged call, arrived at the scene. Cynthia tried to talk her way out of it, but the officers had already seen the footage. One stepped forward and said calmly, "Mrs. Rowell, we're going to need you to come with us." The crowd parted as they led her away, her pastel suit now stained with sweat, her perfect image crumbling under the weight of her own lies. When it was over, I turned toward the camera, the murmurs fading into silence. "You wanted transparency," I said. "Now you have it. If you've ever seen justice catch up to someone who thought they owned the system, you know the sound. It isn't loud. It's the silence afterward, when no one dares defend them anymore. And in that silence, Maple Ridge finally exhaled. The silence after Cynthia's arrest didn't feel like peace. It felt like shock. The kind that hums through the air after thunder splits the sky. People lingered on the lawn, murmuring, scrolling through their phones as the footage replayed on every local news feed. I stood there, watching it all unfold under the banner that still read Community Integrity Forum. The irony burned. Nora's crew began packing their equipment, reporters from other outlets already arriving in unmarked vans. Glenn stood near the curb, arms folded tight across his chest. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of everything he'd carried was finally pressing down at once. "She's gone," I said quietly. He nodded, eyes distant. "They'll make her a headline for a week. Then they'll move on." "Not this time," I replied. "This time it's permanent." Nora walked over, phone still in hand. "The footage hit every major outlet in the state," she said. "Public exposure clause triggered a full compliance review on Maple Ridge's charter. You just rewrote their history." I didn't answer right away. Around us, neighbors who once avoided eye contact now looked at me differently. Not pity, not suspicion, just something closer to respect. Some even approached to apologize for staying quiet. I nodded, but it wasn't forgiveness I wanted. It was closure. By afternoon, the HOA office was sealed off for investigation. Police carried out boxes of records while a state inspector cataloged everything. The air smelled like cut grass and dust, ordinary except for the tension buzzing under every sound. I walked toward the clubhouse where the news vans were parked. Reporters kept asking for statements, but I said nothing until one question cut through the noise. "Mr. Pierce, are you satisfied with today's outcome?" I looked straight into the nearest camera. "Justice isn't satisfaction," I said. "It's restoration, and that's not finished yet." That night, Maple Ridge held its first open meeting without Cynthia. The board table sat empty except for Ben, who looked like he'd aged 10 years in one afternoon. He cleared his throat and said, "We're appointing an interim panel until the state concludes its investigation. Mr. Pierce, as a founding engineer of this development, we'd like your input on community safety reforms." The irony made me want to laugh. I'd spent months being treated like an intruder. Now they wanted my advice. Still, I accepted. Not for recognition, but for insurance. The kind that keeps power from consolidating again. After the meeting, I stepped outside. The sun had dipped low, turning the rows of houses gold. For the first time, Maple Ridge didn't look pristine. It looked human, flawed, real, uncertain. Glenn joined me on the sidewalk, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "They offered me my job back," he said. "Under the state auditor now, not the board." "Are you taking it?" He shrugged. "Yeah, someone's got to fix what she broke." "You already did," I said. He gave a tired smile. "Not yet. You did the hard part. I just pressed record." We stood in silence for a while, listening to the hum of generators from the TV crews still filming wrap-ups. The glow from their lights washed over the lawn like a strange kind of redemption. Then my phone buzzed, a message from Nora. "Check Channel 8. I pulled up the stream. The headline scrolled across the screen. State Board suspends Rowell's broker license pending fraud investigation. Below it, a still image of Cynthia being escorted from the HOA office, eyes hollow, mouth tight. "She lost her license," I said. "Effective immediately." Glenn exhaled slowly. "Then it's over." "Almost," I said. He looked at me, puzzled. "What's left?" I nodded toward the empty porch visible down the street. "Restoring what was taken." The next morning, I loaded the swing frame into my truck. The same wood, the same pale blue Elena had chosen. She insisted on helping, despite the doctor's warnings. I didn't argue. She needed to reclaim it as much as I did. By noon, it was hanging again beneath the oak tree, its chains creaking softly in the breeze. Neighbors watched from a distance as Elena sat down carefully, one hand on her stomach, the other gripping the armrest. I joined her, the wood warm under my palm. For the first time since everything began, the silence felt peaceful. "Do you think she'll ever understand what she did?" Elena asked quietly. "No," I said. "People like her don't learn. They're replaced." A few children passed on bicycles, their laughter carrying across the street. It sounded normal, unbelievably, beautifully normal. When the evening news replayed the broadcast, Nora's voiceover echoed through our living room. "Local engineer exposes HOA corruption. State reforms under review." I muted the sound. Some stories didn't need narration anymore. If you've ever fought someone who believed their power made them untouchable, you know the victory isn't loud. It's quiet, measured in heartbeats, in breath, in peace reclaimed inch by inch. Maple Ridge would never look perfect again. That was the point. 3 days later, the state scheduled an open hearing at the Asheville Civic Center, a public review of HOA leadership conduct. It wasn't a courtroom, but it felt like one. Rows of folding chairs filled with reporters, homeowners, and city officials stretched beneath the vaulted ceiling. Every seat was occupied. Cameras lined the back wall, and front and center, sitting rigid behind the long table, was Cynthia Rowell, back from holding in county custody, now dressed in navy instead of pastels, a mask of composure barely holding together. The air buzzed with whispers. Everyone knew what they'd seen on the footage, but this was different. This was accountability made visible. The hearing moderator, a state housing commissioner, called for order. "We're here to review allegations of abuse of power and physical assault tied to the Maple Ridge Preserve Homeowners Association. Statements will be recorded for public record." I stood when my name was called. The crowd quieted instantly. Flashbulbs went off. "Mr. Pierce," the commissioner said, "you were both a resident and the project's structural engineer. You've submitted digital evidence and first-hand testimony. The floor is yours." I walked to the microphone. For a second, I just looked out at them. Neighbors, journalists, strangers leaning forward, waiting. My palms were slick, but my voice came steady. 3 weeks ago, I began, my wife was 8 months pregnant when she was attacked on our front porch. The woman sitting over there, I pointed toward Cynthia, wasn't just our neighbor. She was the president of our HOA, the person who controlled every fine, every letter, every inch of this neighborhood's life. A murmur rippled through the audience. Cynthia didn't move, but her knuckles whitened on the table. "She told us she enforced order," I continued. "But what she really enforced was fear. She hid behind bylaws to justify cruelty, used fines to silence complaints, and threatened contractors into falsifying reports. When that stopped working, she used violence." The commissioner nodded for me to proceed. I gestured toward the projection screen behind me. "You've all seen the footage, but here's what matters most. The system recorded more than just the assault. It recorded the cover-up." The lights dimmed slightly as the new clip began. The digital audit trail showing Cynthia's login, her deletion request, her override command. Each timestamp flashed red, each one tied to her account. Nora, seated among the press, raised her camera and captured the moment Cynthia's jaw trembled. "She claims she deleted nothing," I said. "But the system doesn't lie. It keeps time, just like justice does. And when she tried to erase the evidence, it created a new one, her own signature." Applause broke out before the moderator could stop it. Cynthia shot up from her seat. "This is harassment!" she shouted, voice cracking. "This man invaded private systems and manipulated files." "Mrs. Rowell," the commissioner said sternly, "you'll have your chance to respond." She turned to the audience, desperate now. "You think he's a hero? He's a technician with a grudge. That woman faked her injuries." The room gasped. Cameras zoomed in. Elena, sitting in the second row, flinched but held her head high. She rested a hand on her stomach, the gesture quiet but powerful. I stepped closer to the microphone. "If anyone doubts her injuries, the hospital records are public under the case file. You can read every detail. What's harder to read," I said, "is why it took a viral video for people to believe what was happening right in front of them." Silence fell heavy. Even Cynthia stopped breathing for a moment. Glenn rose from the back row. His voice trembled at first, but he spoke loud enough for all to hear. "I was the contractor that day," he said. "She ordered me to destroy the footage. When I refused, she threatened my family. That's the truth." Every camera turned toward him. The commissioner leaned forward. "You're confirming that Mrs. Rowell personally instructed you to tamper with evidence?" "Yes," Glenn said, "and I have the original directive in writing." Gasps filled the hall. The commissioner signaled to the clerks, who rushed forward to collect Glenn's signed affidavit. Cynthia's face collapsed into disbelief. "This is a public forum," the commissioner said gravely. "And Mrs. Rowell, based on this corroboration and the confirmed footage, your conduct meets the criteria for permanent removal from HOA governance. The state will refer this to the district attorney for formal prosecution." The crowd erupted. Some cheered, others shouted in outrage, but everyone was on their feet. Reporters swarmed forward. Flashbulbs strobed. Cynthia turned on me, her voice breaking. "You ruined me." "No," I said quietly. "You did that the moment you thought power made you untouchable." Security moved in, escorting her out as the crowd's noise swelled again. Nora caught my eye from the sidelines, giving a small nod, the kind that meant it's over. But it wasn't just over. It was exposed. As the commissioner banged the gavel to close the hearing, I looked around the room. Neighbors who once cowered now stood upright. Glenn leaned against the wall, exhausted but free. Elena's eyes met mine across the aisle, steady and bright. If you've ever seen truth win in front of a crowd, you know it doesn't roar, it echoes. And in that hall, it echoed like thunder. The echo of the gavel still rang in my ears long after the crowd had dispersed. The civic center emptied slowly, leaving behind scattered papers, echoing footsteps, and the low hum of camera crews packing up. For the first time in weeks, I felt no need to rush, no fear of what would come next. Cynthia Rowell was gone, escorted out under flashing lights, her power finally stripped bare. But the truth didn't end with her arrest. It began there. Outside, Asheville's evening air was cool and alive. The sky burned orange over the mountains as I stepped onto the courthouse steps. Nora was waiting near the van, camera slung over her shoulder, exhaustion written all over her face. She handed me a folded paper, tomorrow's front page draft. Engineer exposes HOA corruption, Rowell faces criminal charges. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. "No, we did." Glenn was nearby, sitting on the curb, hands clasped, staring at nothing. The man looked hollowed out, like someone who'd finally exhaled after holding his breath for too long. I walked over, crouched beside him. "You all right?" He gave a shaky laugh. "I don't know. I think I just watched my whole life change in an afternoon." "Good," I said. "Means it mattered." He nodded slowly, eyes glinting in the streetlight. "They offered me witness protection for the trial. I'm taking it for the kids." "Do it," I said. "You gave everyone here their voices back." Nora called out from the van. "State investigators are opening a reform task force. They're naming it after the case, the Pierce Provision. It mandates body camera retention for all HOA enforcement actions statewide. I froze for a second, absorbing the words. The system I'd built for liability protection had just become a model for justice. By the time I drove home, Maple Ridge was a different place. The banner was gone, the HOA office locked, and the manicured perfection that once felt suffocating finally seemed to breathe. Some lawns were imperfect again, patchy, human. I parked in front of the house and saw the swing swaying softly under the oak, its chains glinting like they were waiting for me. Elena was on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, the baby monitor glowing faintly beside her. She smiled when she saw me, that tired kind of smile that carries both relief and disbelief. "How did it go?" she asked. "Better than I could have planned," I said, sitting beside her. "She's finished. The state's filing charges, the board's dissolved, and Glenn's safe." Elena rested her head on my shoulder. "You really did it, Landon." "No," I said quietly. "The truth did." The wind rustled through the trees, and somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Normal sounds, the kind we hadn't heard without tension in months. I reached up and gave the swing a gentle push. It creaked once, steady and alive again. "You remember what you said that day?" I asked softly. "When she called the swing illegal?" Elena smiled faintly. "I said a porch without a swing isn't a home." "Exactly." For a long moment, we sat there watching the sky fade to deep blue, the air cooling around us. The neighborhood lights came on one by one, no longer synchronized by her mandates, but scattered, uneven, real. I realized then that peace isn't symmetry, it's freedom. A soft cry came through the baby monitor. Elena stood, heading inside. I stayed, staring at the swing's gentle motion and thinking of everything it had survived. The fall, the blood, the silence, the war. And now, it was back where it belonged. Nora's broadcast went live that night. I didn't watch it from the beginning. I just caught the ending. Her voice steady, her tone proud. This case stands as proof that no institution, no title, and no position is above accountability. Justice, once set in motion, doesn't stop. I muted the TV and looked out at the street. In the reflection on the window, I saw my own face. Not angry anymore, not vengeful, just certain. Cynthia had believed exposure would ruin her image. She was right. But what she didn't understand was that exposure doesn't destroy truth. It reveals it. And sometimes, that's all it takes to rebuild everything someone tried to break. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. The porch light flickered once, steadying. Elena came back out, baby asleep in her arms. I stood, wrapped my arm around her, and together we looked at the swing swaying under the oak, the quiet symbol of everything we'd fought for. No banners, no rules, no fear, just us, our home, and the sound of peace creaking gently in the wind.